The massive holographic display in the Galactic Confederation's central chamber showed the current state of known space in the year 2387. 73 different species had found their place in this carefully ordered universe, each represented by glowing symbols that indicated their technological level, military strength, and overall importance to galactic society. Near the bottom of the display, almost forgotten among the brightest stars, sat a small blue dot labeled Earth, Human Territory. The humans occupied 12 worlds scattered across 2 star systems, their symbol barely visible against the overwhelming presence of the major powers. Most species had forgotten humans existed at all. Admiral Velthak stood before the War Council of the Zephyrian Empire, his 4 arms crossed behind his back as he studied the latest reports from the outer territories. The Zephyrians had ruled the military arm of the Confederation for over 3 centuries, their advanced plasma weapons and shield technology making them the undisputed peacekeepers of the galaxy. The humans have rejected Mining Decree 4471, announced Councillor Rithmon, his voice carrying a note of disbelief. They claim the asteroid belt around their Kepler system belongs to them by right of first settlement. Velthak's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. The idea that humans would dare challenge Zephyrian authority was almost amusing. These primitive creatures had barely mastered faster-than-light travel, their ships held together with whatever materials they could scavenge. Their weapons were crude chemical propulsion systems that would barely scratch Zephyrian armor. How many ships do they have in that system? Velthak asked, though he already knew the answer. 37 vessels, Admiral. Mostly converted cargo ships and a few patrol boats. Their largest warship is smaller than one of our escort frigates. The other council members shared the Admiral's amusement. The humans had been mining those asteroids for nearly 50 years, pulling out enough rare metals to fuel their slow expansion across nearby star systems. The Zephyrians had finally decided those resources would be better used by a more advanced species. They will learn their place, Velthak declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. Deploy the Third Fleet to the Kepler system. Standard pacification protocols. I want this resolved within 1 standard day. 3 star systems away, on the blue world where humanity had first learned to reach for the stars, Defense Minister Kim Tai sat in an underground bunker that served as Earth's military headquarters. The reinforced walls were covered with screens showing tactical displays, communication feeds from the colonies, and the approaching nightmare that would soon reach human space. 50 Zephyrian warships moved through hyperspace toward the Kepler system, their formation perfect and their intent clear. Kim Tai had spent his entire career studying the military doctrines of the major galactic powers. He knew exactly what those ships could do to his people. Lieutenant Park Sol stood beside her commanding officer, watching the sensor data with growing concern. She was young for her rank, promoted quickly due to humanity's desperate need for trained officers. Like most humans, she had grown up hearing stories about the great galactic civilizations, dreaming of the day when her species might join them as equals. Sir, the Zephyrian fleet will reach Kepler Station in 18 hours, she reported, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Kim Tai nodded slowly, his weathered face showing no emotion. He had fought in the border wars against the pirates who sometimes raided human colonies, but this was different. This was not some ragtag band of criminals looking for easy targets. This was the military might of an empire that could crush entire star systems without breaking stride. What are our orders, sir? Park Sol asked quietly. The defense minister stood up from his chair and walked to the main display, where the tactical situation played out in real time. The human fleet at Kepler looked pathetically small compared to the approaching enemy force. Captain Lee Minute commanded those ships, and she was one of the best officers in the human navy. But even the best human captain was working with ships that were decades behind Zephyrian technology. The Zephyrians expect us to surrender or run away, Kim Tai said finally. They think we are weak because our ships are old and our weapons are simple. They think we will give up our homes to avoid a fight we cannot win. He turned to face his aide, and Park Sol saw something in his eyes that made her stand straighter. It was not fear or desperation. It was the same look she had seen in history books, in the faces of humans who had stood against impossible odds throughout their species' long climb from a single world to the stars. Send a message to all colonies, all ships, all stations, Kim Tai ordered. Code Black Authorization. Tell them the Zephyrians are coming, and they expect us to kneel. Tell them to remember Thermopylae. Tell them to remember the Alamo. Tell them to remember every time in our history when someone tried to break us and we chose to fight instead. Park Sol's fingers flew over her console as she prepared the transmission. What else should I tell them, sir? Kim Tai looked back at the tactical display, where the countdown to the Zephyrian arrival continued its relentless march toward zero. Tell them to remember who we are. We are humans. We do not surrender. We do not break. And we do not forget. The message went out across human space, carried by the fastest ships and the most powerful transmitters humanity possessed. On mining stations and farming colonies, in the engine rooms of cargo haulers and the bridges of patrol ships, humans received the call and began to prepare for war. Captain Lee Minute stood on the bridge of the Soul's Pride watching the Zephyrian fleet drop out of hyperspace like a swarm of deadly silver insects. The converted mining vessel shuddered under her feet as the engines strained to maintain position. Around her, the crew worked at stations that had been hauling ore just months ago, now hastily converted to fire weapons that were never meant for ship-to-ship combat. 37 human ships against 50 Zephyrian warships, reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Bae Su. His voice stayed calm, but sweat ran down his face as he read the sensor data. Admiral, they are broadcasting surrender demands on all frequencies. Lee Minute had commanded mining operations in this asteroid field for 8 years before the war began. She knew every rock, every hiding spot, every dangerous navigation hazard that could crush an unwary ship. Her vessel was ugly and slow compared to the sleek Zephyrian cruisers, but it was tough and it was home. Open a channel to all human ships, she ordered. This is Captain Lee Minute to all vessels. They want us to surrender. They think we'll run away because their ships are bigger and faster. But they made one mistake. She paused, watching the enemy formation advance in perfect military order, their plasma weapons charging with deadly blue light. They forgot that humans don't know how to quit. All ships, break formation. Fight your own battle. Make them remember us. What happened next had never been seen before in the long history of galactic warfare. Instead of maintaining defensive positions or attempting to retreat, the human fleet scattered in 37 different directions. Each captain chose their own target and their own method of attack, turning the battle into chaos that no military computer could predict or counter. Captain Choi Han commanded the cargo hauler Busan Runner a massive ship designed to carry tons of raw materials between mining stations. When the Zephyrians had demanded surrender, he had looked at his cargo hold full of industrial explosives meant for asteroid mining and made a simple decision. All crew to escape pods, he announced over the ship's communication system. We're going to show these aliens what humans do when backed into a corner. The Busan Runner charged straight at the largest Zephyrian cruiser, her engines pushed far beyond safe limits. Enemy plasma bolts tore into her hull, but Choi Han kept his ship on course. At the last moment, just before impact, he dumped his entire cargo into space and triggered the detonation system. The explosion lit up the entire battlefield. When the light faded, both the Busan Runner and the Zephyrian cruiser were gone, replaced by an expanding cloud of debris and superheated gas. On the other side of the battle, Captain Kim Sejin guided her patrol vessel Incheon's Fury through the asteroid field like a dancer weaving between partners. Her ship had been designed for police work, chasing smugglers and pirates through dangerous space. Against Zephyrian military vessels, her light weapons were nearly useless. Nearly useless, but not completely. Target their sensor arrays, she ordered her weapons officer. We can't punch through their armor, but we can blind them. The Incheon's Fury darted between asteroids, using her mining laser arrays to slice through the delicate sensor equipment that stuck out from Zephyrian hulls like electronic whiskers. Each pass left enemy ships groping blindly through space, their powerful weapons unable to lock onto targets they could not see. When 2 Zephyrian destroyers cornered her ship against a massive asteroid, Kim Soo-jin did something that violated every rule of space combat. She shut down her engines and used the asteroid's gravity to slingshot around it, coming up behind her pursuers and raking their rear armor with everything she had. Admiral Velthak watched the battle from his flagship, his forearms trembling with rage and disbelief. These primitive humans were fighting like animals, throwing away their lives without strategy or sense. They rammed his ships with cargo haulers, used mining equipment as weapons, and seemed to care nothing for their own survival. Sir, we've lost the cruiser Dominance and 2 destroyers, his tactical officer reported. The humans are using suicide attacks. They're savages, Velthak snarled. Destroy them all. Show no mercy. But mercy had never been part of the human plan. Captain Oh-yun flew her small fighter through the battle like a comet, her ship too fast and too small for the big Zephyrian guns to track. She had been a racing pilot before the war, competing in the dangerous sport of asteroid racing that tested human reflexes against the deadly beauty of space. Now she used those same skills to dart between enemy ships, her fighters' small weapons targeting weak points in their armor. When a Zephyrian beam finally caught her ship and sent it spinning toward destruction, she used her last moments to transmit everything she had recorded. "This is Captain O'Yun to all human colonies," her voice crackled across space as her fighter broke apart around her. "We're dying here, but we're taking them with us. We bled them. Remember that. Humans can make them bleed." When the Battle of Kepler Station ended 6 hours after it began, 21 human ships had been destroyed. Their crews had fought with desperate courage against impossible odds, using tactics that no civilized species had ever attempted. But floating in space around them were the broken remains of 9 Zephyrian warships. 9 vessels of the most powerful military force in the galaxy, destroyed by mining ships and patrol boats crewed by a species that the galaxy considered primitive and weak. The battle footage spread through human space like wildfire, carried by the fastest ships and broadcast on every frequency. In mining colonies and farming settlements, on trading stations and frontier outposts, humans watched their people die fighting against the darkness. And they began to understand that sometimes, the only way to win was to refuse to lose. Yang Subin had worked at the Titan manufacturing complex for 12 years, operating machines that built everything from farming equipment to space station components. She was a quiet woman who kept to herself, raising 2 children while her husband served on a cargo hauler that ran supplies between the outer colonies. The morning after the Battle of Kepler Station, she walked into the factory floor with fire in her eyes. "Listen up, everyone," she called out to her fellow workers as they gathered around their morning shift assignments. "My husband's ship was supposed to meet that convoy from Kepler yesterday. They never showed up. We all know why." The factory floor fell silent. Everyone had seen the battle footage by now, watched human ships dying against impossible odds while the galaxy's most powerful military force showed no mercy to miners and farmers. "The Zephyrians think they can scare us into giving up," Yang Subin continued, her voice growing stronger. "They think because we make tractors and water pumps instead of plasma cannons, we're helpless. They're wrong." She walked over to the main production line, where robotic arms were assembling atmospheric processes for a new colony. With quick, practiced movements, she began reprogramming the manufacturing system. "These machines can build anything we tell them to build," she said. "Right now, they're making life support systems. But the same motors that pump air can guide missiles. The same sensors that monitor crops can track enemy ships. We're going to show these aliens what humans can do when we put our minds to it." Within hours, the entire factory had been converted to military production. Workers who had spent years building peaceful machinery now crafted combat drones, each one designed to swarm enemy vessels and explode against their hulls. Yang Subin worked 18-hour shifts, teaching other factories across human space how to make the same conversion. 3 systems away, Merchant Captain Kang Do-hyun received the emergency broadcast while his convoy was hauling industrial supplies to the frontier colonies. His 12 cargo ships were slow and unarmored, designed for moving tons of equipment across space in the safest possible way. They had no weapons beyond small point defense systems meant to stop debris from hitting their hulls. "Captain," his first officer Kim Minute-ho said quietly, "we just got word that the Zephyrians are moving on the Vega system next. That's right in our shipping route." Kang Do-hyun stared at the tactical display showing his convoy's planned path. His ships carried mining equipment, construction materials, and fabrication systems meant for colonists trying to build new lives on distant worlds. In normal times, pirates might try to steal some of his cargo, but no one would waste time attacking slow cargo haulers during a war. But these were not normal times, and the Zephyrians had made it clear that all human ships were targets. "Change course for the Ceres shipyard," he ordered. "And send a message to our cargo manifest. Tell them we need every piece of mining equipment, every construction robot, and every fabrication unit converted for combat use." His convoy spent the next week being transformed from peaceful merchants into something the galaxy had never seen before. Mining lasers became ship-killing weapons. Construction robots were reprogrammed as boarding parties. Fabrication systems began churning out ammunition and missile guidance systems. When Kang Do-hyun's convoy emerged from the shipyard, it looked like a collection of cargo haulers. But hidden in their holds were weapons systems that could turn industrial equipment into instruments of war. His ships could build their own ammunition, repair their own damage, and adapt their weapons to whatever they encountered. On Mars, 16-year-old Song Han-ae watched the news reports with her classmates in the Advanced Engineering program at New Seoul Technical Academy. The images from Kepler Station showed human ships being torn apart by weapons that seemed impossibly advanced compared to anything humanity possessed. "Our missiles are too slow," she said to her friend Park Jun during their lunch break. The Zephyrian point defense systems shoot them down before they can hit anything important. Park Jun was the best programmer in their class, able to write code that could make machines do things their designers never intended. What if we made the missiles smarter, he suggested. Instead of flying in straight lines, they could dodge and weave like fighter pilots. Song Ha-Ne's eyes lit up with inspiration. Better than that. What if we made them learn? Each missile could watch how the enemy defenses work and tell the next missile how to avoid them. The two teenagers spent the next 3 days writing code that would change the nature of space warfare. Their guidance system used artificial intelligence to analyze enemy defensive patterns and adapt in real time. Each missile that was destroyed transmitted its data back to the launcher, making the next volley harder to stop. When they presented their work to the school's engineering department, the professors stared in amazement. Within a week, their design was being manufactured in factories across human space. Dr. Yo Jin-woo stood before the Emergency War Council in the deepest bunker on Earth, surrounded by displays showing the transformation taking place across human civilization. Factory workers were building weapons. Merchants were becoming privateers. Children were designing military systems that professional engineers had never imagined. The Zephyrians are following standard galactic military doctrine, he explained to President Nam Sua and her cabinet. They expect us to mass our forces and fight conventional battles. They expect us to surrender when the odds become impossible. He gestured to a holographic display showing human space, where thousands of small lights represented converted factories, retrofitted ships, and improvised weapons systems. Instead, we're doing something no species has ever attempted. We're turning our entire civilization into a weapon. Every human, every ship, every factory is now part of our military force. The Zephyrians have more advanced technology, but we have something they've never encountered. What's that? President Nam Sua asked. Dr. Yo Jin-woo smiled grimly. We have humans who refuse to accept that the war is already lost. We're not trying to outfight them with better ships or stronger weapons. We're trying to out-crazy them with ideas they've never seen in tactics that violate every rule of civilized warfare. The transformation was complete. Humanity had awakened. Admiral Velthak's flagship hung in space above the smoldering ruins of Titan Colony, its sensors recording data that made no sense according to everything the Zephyrian Empire knew about warfare. What had begun as a simple punitive raid against a human mining settlement had turned into the most costly single battle in recent Zephyrian military history. The tactical display showed the timeline of the attack, and Velthak studied it with growing frustration. His intelligence reports had described Titan Colony as a typical human mining operation, with perhaps 3,000 civilians extracting rare metals from a cluster of asteroids. The defense force was supposed to consist of a few security guards and maybe 1 or 2 patrol boats. Instead, his fleet had encountered something that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Captain Lim Sora had been the colony administrator, a middle-aged woman whose previous experience consisted of managing mining quotas and settling disputes between work crews. When the Zephyrian fleet arrived, she should have surrendered immediately to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Instead, she had turned the entire colony into a weapon. Show me the first phase of the attack again, Velthak ordered his tactical officer. The holographic display replayed the opening moments of the battle. Zephyrian ships had approached the colony in standard formation, expecting to broadcast surrender demands and receive immediate compliance. Instead, they were met by a barrage of mining charges that had been converted into guided missiles. The humans had somehow reprogrammed their asteroid mining explosives, turning tools meant for breaking rocks into weapons that could damage military-grade armor. But that was only the beginning of their madness. The mining mechs, sir, his tactical officer pointed to the display. Look at what they did with the mining mechs. Construction robots the size of buildings had been turned into mobile artillery platforms. Equipment designed to move tons of ore was now hurling improvised projectiles at Zephyrian ships, using the colony's own industrial infrastructure as ammunition. When plasma bolts destroyed one mech, human workers would pilot another one into position, continuing the fight even as their defenses crumbled around them. They used civilian workers as soldiers, Velthak's intelligence officer reported. Engineers, miners, cafeteria staff, even children helped coordinate the defense. They treated everyone like they were trained military personnel. This was perhaps the most shocking aspect of human behavior. In civilized galactic warfare, civilians were evacuated or surrendered for their own protection. They did not grab weapons and fight alongside military forces. They especially did not volunteer for suicide missions against superior enemies. But the humans of Titan Colony had done exactly that. When Captain Lim Sora realized that her defenses could not hold against the full Zephyrian assault, she had evacuated all non-essential personnel to the emergency shelters deep inside the colony's main asteroid. Then she had made a decision that still haunted Velthak's dreams. "Play the final transmission," he ordered quietly. The main display showed the last communication from Titan Colony, broadcast on all frequencies as Zephyrian ships closed in for the final assault. Captain Lim Sora appeared on screen, her face dirty and blooded from hours of combat, standing in what looked like the colony's power control center. "This is Captain Lim Sora to all human colonies," she said, her voice calm despite the explosions echoing in the background. "Titan Colony is falling, but we're not going quietly. We've shown these aliens that humans don't surrender, and we don't break. Remember us. Remember what we did here." She turned away from the camera and began entering commands into the fusion reactor control system. The feed went dead just as the reactor began its overload sequence. The explosion that followed had vaporized the colony's main asteroid and damaged 3 Zephyrian warships beyond repair. Captain Lim Sora and the 200 volunteers who had stayed with her were killed instantly, but their sacrifice had cost the Zephyrian Empire more ships and personnel than they had lost in any single engagement for over a century. "Sir," his communications officer interrupted Velthak's brooding. "We're receiving reports from across the Confederation. Other species are asking questions about our military operations." This was the development that truly worried the Admiral. The Battle of Titan Colony had been broadcast across human space, but somehow the footage had leaked to other species as well. Now the Altarian merchant guilds were demanding to know why they needed Zephyrian military protection if humans could destroy Zephyrian ships with mining equipment. The vegan agricultural colonies had begun organizing their own defense forces, claiming they needed to protect themselves from pirates. Intelligence reports suggested they were actually studying human tactics and converting their own industrial equipment into weapons systems. Even worse, some of the smaller species were beginning to communicate directly with human colonies, sharing information about Zephyrian military weaknesses and discussing mutual defense agreements. The human example of resistance was spreading like a disease through the carefully ordered structure of the Galactic Confederation. "How many more ships do we need to end this?" Velthak demanded of his tactical officer, his forearms clenched in frustration. Lieutenant Commander Zithare, a veteran of dozens of successful pacification campaigns, looked at the data with obvious confusion. "Sir, I don't think more ships are the solution. These humans fight like they have nothing left to lose. Every battle costs us more than it costs them, even when we win." The truth was becoming clear to everyone on the Zephyrian command staff, though none of them wanted to admit it. The humans were not fighting to win in any conventional sense. They were fighting to prove that they could not be broken, and in doing so, they were inspiring every oppressed species in the galaxy to question the natural order that had kept the peace for 8 centuries. Admiral Velthak stared at the tactical display, watching his fleet count its losses after another successful operation against human forces. For the first time in his long military career, he began to wonder if victory was possible against an enemy that measured success not by territory captured or ships preserved, but by how much damage they could inflict before they died. The neutral station orbiting Proxima Centauri had been hastily constructed for one purpose: to end a war that had torn apart the carefully maintained order of the galaxy. Ambassador Shin Woojin walked through its sterile corridors, her footsteps echoing in the artificial silence that surrounded diplomatic negotiations. Behind her, Captain Park Ji-ho moved with the careful precision of a man who had learned to survive when survival seemed impossible. Park Ji-ho's face told the story of humanity's war better than any official report. Burns from plasma fire marked his left cheek, while his right eye had been replaced with a cybernetic implant after his ship had been boarded during the Battle of New Busan. His left arm ended at the wrist, lost when he had manually detonated a mining charge to destroy a Zephyrian boarding party. He wore his scars like medals, each one representing a moment when humans had chosen to fight rather than surrender. "The Zephyrian delegation is waiting," the station administrator informed them, his voice carefully neutral. The administrator was a member of the Centaurian Council, one of the few species that had remained completely outside the conflict between humans and the Zephyrian Empire. Shin Woojin nodded and entered the main conference room, where Admiral Velthak sat with his own advisors. The Zephyrian leader looked older than when the war had begun 26 months earlier. His forearms moved restlessly, and his eyes held the haunted expression of a military commander who had discovered that victory could be more costly than defeat. The numbers told the story that words could not express. The Zephyrian Empire had lost 147 warships during the conflict with humanity, more vessels than they had lost in all their previous military operations combined. Their shipyards worked around the clock to replace destroyed cruisers and frigates, while their economy strained under the cost of fighting an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with each defeat. 26 months, Admiral Velthak said quietly as Shin Woo-jin took her seat across from him. 26 months of fighting humans who should have been crushed in the first week. Do you know what my tactical computers project for the final outcome of this war? Shin Woo-jin waited silently for him to continue. Total Zephyrian victory, achieved at the cost of our entire military force, Velthak continued, his voice bitter with irony. We can destroy every human ship, conquer every human colony, and occupy every human world. The price will be the complete destruction of our ability to maintain order anywhere else in the galaxy. The ambassador understood the implications immediately. The Zephyrian Empire served as the military arm of the Galactic Confederation, keeping peace among 73 different species. If they exhausted their forces fighting humans, dozens of other conflicts would explode across known space. Your terms, Velthak said, his voice heavy with defeat. Shin Woo-jin had been preparing for this moment since the first human ship had been destroyed at Kepler Station. She had studied the political structure of the Galactic Confederation, analyzed the relationships between different species, and identified the fundamental weaknesses that had made this war inevitable. Complete restructuring of the Galactic Confederation, she replied calmly. Equal representation for all species, regardless of technological level or military power. No forced resource extraction from any world without the consent of its inhabitants. Democratic decision-making processes to replace the current system of rule by the most powerful species. Admiral Velthak's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or despair. You want us to give political power to species that barely understand faster than light travel. You want farmers and miners to have the same voice as civilizations that have mastered plasma fusion and quantum computing. We want every species to have the right to determine their own future, Shin Woo-jin corrected. The current system created this war. You decided that humans should surrender their asteroid mining rights because your technology could extract the resources more efficiently. You never asked if we wanted to give up our homes. Behind her, Captain Park Ji-ho stepped forward slightly, and every Zephyrian in the room could see the scars that marked his body. His presence was a reminder of what humans had sacrificed to reach this moment, and what they were prepared to sacrifice if the negotiations failed. There's one more term, Shin Woo-jin continued. Protection for any species facing extinction or subjugation. If any member of the new confederation threatens to destroy another species or force them into slavery, humanity will consider that an act of war against all free peoples. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Humanity was offering to serve as the guardians of the weak, the protectors of species that could not defend themselves against more powerful neighbors. It was a role that the Zephyrians had once claimed for themselves, but they had used their power to maintain order through intimidation and force. The treaty negotiations took 3 days, but the outcome had been determined by 26 months of human resistance. When the final documents were signed, they were immediately broadcast across the galaxy, carrying news that would reshape the political structure of known space. As the ceremony concluded, Shin Woo-jin delivered humanity's final statement to the assembled delegates and the billions of beings watching throughout the galaxy. You thought you could break us because we were small and weak, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems that allowed different species to understand each other. You forgot that humans have spent our entire history learning how to survive against impossible odds. You taught us that might makes right in your galaxy. We taught you that the mightiest force in the universe is someone who absolutely refuses to quit. The Galactic Confederation reformed under new principles, with humans serving as the unexpected peacekeepers who ensured that no species would ever again face the choice between submission and extinction. The galaxy had learned its lesson: never start a war with a species that considers victory and death equally acceptable outcomes.